So here we are outside the iconic Kelvingrove art galleries in the West End of Glasgow for our next instalment of Take a Pew. Here with me on the pew today we've got Russell Barr, who's the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. We've got Alison, who's the Deputy Director of Shelter for Scotland, and we've got Tommy MacNeil, who's a minister in Lewis. Russell, if I could start with you. For your moderatorial year, you have chosen as the two major themes that you would like to focus on as homelessness and recruitment to the ministry.
Yep.
Could you say a little bit about why those two are so important to you?
Let's start with recruitment to the ministry. People will sometimes ask, and maybe because you have this role as moderator, did you always want to be a minister? And the answer is no. What I wanted to be growing up was a professional golfer, but I felt called to ministry. And part of that calling was people who were really influential and who helped me along the way. So over the years since I was ordained in 1979, Neil, I've been involved with supervising and training, I'm afraid so, lots of students. And that's something which has been a significant part of my own life and work as a minister. And it's something that I'd like to encourage because it's a fantastic job.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic privilege to work as a minister. So, encouraging people to think about the ministries of the church and to perhaps think about might I be a minister as well is something which is very dear and precious to me.
So it's this fantastic job and you want to focus on it as one of your major themes. Tell us a little bit about why you feel homelessness and issues around homelessness are a big part of that.
Working as a parish minister, as I've always done in Glasgow and Greenock and Edinburgh, you tend to have quite a local kind of focus. You're concerned about your own congregation, you're concerned about your own community. But as we came up towards AD 2000, the millennium, and as a Kirk session in Edinburgh at Crammond, we tried to think about ways in which we might celebrate the millennium. Was it not 2,000 years since Jesus was born? Who knows? But the Bible story is about there was no room at the inn. And there seemed to be an awful lot of people who were homeless in Edinburgh at that time. So a group of us wondered whether or not we might think about some way of supporting folk who have been homeless. And from that simple little seed, what became Fresh Start grew. And it grew starting in the Church of Scotland, but then grew ecumenically to embrace all the churches in Edinburgh.
Alison, could you say a little bit about how you came to care so much about the issues of homelessness and working with people who are experiencing it?
I started as a very naive English literature graduate working in a homeless men's hostel in an area of Edinburgh called the Grassmarket, which has traditionally been an area where there's been quite a concentration of services for homeless people. And it was an older group of guys who lived in the hostel. Many different things had gone wrong in their lives that had led them to that situation, but there was this central theme of the Second World War having really fractured things for them. So on the one hand, you had a group of guys who'd fought for their country and could rightfully look to be supported and lauded for that, but actually were also being seen as tramps and dossers, and these were the group of people that other people would walk by. And I think there's just that core Christian message of not being the person who walks by, being the person who says, I want to reach out the hand of help. And I think that's why I really welcome what Russell's doing, because I think that the visible signs of homelessness are quite often the people that we see on the streets, in the cardboard box, in the doorway.
The roofless community.
The roofless community, and that is a real and sadly growing problem in Scotland today. But there's a vast number of people who you won't see on the streets but are nonetheless homeless. And I think there's a very powerful role that the ministry can play in raising awareness and reaching out around that.
There's a lot of evidence around that, as you know, Alison.
Indeed.
Here in Glasgow, the City Mission last winter, in Edinburgh, Bethany Christian Trust, they supported more people than they'd ever done over their night shelters through the winter months.
So there's a huge calling to work with people who are experiencing homelessness. Tommy, if I could just bring you in, because we've been talking about homelessness in Glasgow and Edinburgh. You live in the north of Scotland and in Lewis. Could you just say something about why it's important for you to engage once again with people who are experiencing homelessness in Stornoway?
Yeah, I think there's some myths around homelessness, and I think one of the big myths is that it's a city problem. It's nationwide, and you know, Lewis is very rural. And the local authority recognised with the lack of local authority housing, you know, cheap affordable housing, that there was a significant homelessness problem, and so just within the last year they've opened a new homeless unit where 40 to 50 individuals have a place to stay, a roof over their head. And what we do is that we look to partner with the local authority in what they're doing through the Shed project, which is a place for people to come, but also just through acts of kindness. We have this initiative called the Giving Tree, where at Christmas time we contacted the homeless service and said, please give us the basic details of individuals, because for us that's an absolutely key part, is that if someone has the title homeless over them, then they're already being judged.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be homeless, it should be person, individual, and whatever their name is. And so we then gave gifts to all of the individuals who were in there, just as an expression of our love and saying, you know, you're not forgotten. You may be in a homeless unit, hopefully it's not going to be forever, but whilst you're there, then just be aware there's people in this community who love you and who want the best for you.
So all three of you have spoken about experiences, strong experiences of initially doing things for people who were going through a period of homelessness. But it seems to always move beyond that. It seems to be about something which is about an encounter, which is not just doing something for someone, but discovering that they also allow us to come alive. Alison, do you want to say something about that?
That really resonates for me in terms of the day-to-day experiences of a number of the staff in our services. I don't think the helping relationship is ever one way. And going back to what you were saying, I think there's just that bit about connecting with somebody as a human being. And you learn as much about yourself as you do about that person by just going into it with a bit more depth of understanding, trying to get behind the labels and understand the stories. And I think in understanding the stories, that's where we connect with humanity and caring and compassion, those core values.
Russell?
Yeah, let me support what Alison's saying, but let me do the English lit bit and say Fresh Start was born not to do anything for people, but to do things with people. And that seems to me to be such a crucial difference, but it also addresses your question, Neil, because we all have periods in our life, stages in our life, when we need some help, some support. And typically, I'm glad to say for most people, being homeless is a stage. It's a horrible stage, it's a really difficult stage, but with appropriate help and support, they pick up the threads of life again. And so working with people who have been or are experiencing homeless, recognising through many of our volunteers, through our staff, through myself, that there are periods of life when you need somebody there to give you a bit of encouragement and support. There's nothing special about it, it's just normal and ordinary and human.
Certainly in Stornoway and in Lewis, there was a growing divide between the church and the community, and lots of folk in the church would go and do their Sunday thing and look at people in the community who had their problems and just think, well, that's your world. And actually, you know, we're meant to represent Jesus. And one of the amazing things about him is that every negative human experience we will go out of our way to avoid, he chose to embrace. And part of that was homelessness. He had no place to lay down his head. And for us, when we engage, whether it's someone who's struggling with issues of homelessness or addiction, they're proving to be a gift to us. Because they're opening our eyes to the real needs that are out there, and we don't think that we've got all of the answers, but we look to have something of that Christ-like heart that says, well, you know, I can't sort everything out, but I can help you with this, or I can help you with that. And actually going beyond just saying that in words and going beyond saying that from a pulpit on a Sunday, and actually, you know, we have a Joseph Storehouse. There's people in our community who, because of the financial crisis, we have a food bank, but they struggle with that in our local community. So we set up Joseph Storehouse, and there's no form to fill in. If you need food for you, for your family, just come. We don't ask any questions and receive it. And so I think for us, engaging with individuals with some of these challenges, then they've been a tremendous gift to us and opening our eyes to the community, but also to how Christ would have us respond to these needs. So
and help you recognise something of your own vulnerability,
absolutely,
and something of your own need.
Yeah, that's right.
Like everybody else, you too stand before the cross, as it were,
without question,
in need of forgiveness and help and, and compassion. Yeah,
it's not a them and us.
And the power of that can't be underestimated, because I think one of the things that we hear about all the time is how stigmatising the experience of homelessness can be, back to that idea about the labels being so difficult. And I think for people to be treated with decency, with care, with compassion, just takes that away, and it becomes transformative.
Yeah, it does.
It's really interesting to hear you use these words, care, compassion, transformative, because an understanding of what the great message is of the church, the gospel, the good news, really chimes with all these big themes. Wouldn't you say so, Russell?
Yes.
Yes.
A big hearty yes there.
Yeah, of course it does, and it's the tangible, visible expression of what we believe. It's not just, it seems to me, and I hope the others would agree too. It's not just, you know, what does this parable, what does this story, what does this, you know, commit me in my head to believing. It's how does it shape the way I live? What does it expect from me in the way I deal with other people and the way I deal with the world around me? So yeah, transformative, all of that.
I think these words can sum up ministry. We face some big challenges. That's true, I think, across the nation. But what we've tried to do in Stornoway, and what I've tried to do, is turn that on its head. So instead of looking at the challenges, we view them as opportunities. As a result of that, then when we began to engage with our community and build bridges to it, then honestly, as a church, we felt overwhelmed because the needs were so intense. And we learned this principle. It was a very basic principle for us, but you just start with what you have and you start with where you are. So, you know, Jesus invited the wee boy with his packed lunch. What do you have? What does the crowd have? And that fed 5,000. God asked Moses, what's in your hand? And for us, a number of years ago, 8-9 years ago, we started with Joseph's Storehouse. We started with the Giving Tree, very simple acts of kindness. But as a result of that, then 2 years ago, we opened the shed that cost us £250,000. And so for us, our local story, I think, is something that can be encouraging and inspiring for the rest of the church, and actually other churches. You're not the answer to all the needs of your community, but you can do something. So start with what you have and start with where you are.
Thank you, Tommy, and I'd like to thank you, Russell, and Alison, and Tommy for being our guests on what's been a fascinating discussion here outside the Kelvingrove Art Galleries in Glasgow. You can follow more Take a Pew discussions on the website. Details will appear below. But for today from Glasgow, from Take a Pew, goodbye.